Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to chat a little bit about the AUMF and the role of Congress and what we can do to assist in the efforts in Afghanistan. The Constitution grants Congress with the sole power to declare war. With this authority comes a solemn responsibility to make sure our forces are properly resourced and a commitment to making sure our nation actually brings the wars that we authorize to an end. As has been referenced today, military operations in Afghanistan are conducted pursuant to a broad AUMF that Congress enacted in 2001 to authorize the use of all necessary and appropriate military force against the perpetrators of 9/11 to prevent those terrorists and their enablers from conducting a future attack. While the 107th Congress clearly passed the 2001 AUMF to respond to the 9/11 attacks, subsequent Congresses and presidents have done little to prevent multiple administrations from interpreting this 2001 law to justify nearly any military operation in the region. Whether one supports or opposes the current U.S. military strategy in Afghanistan, there should be some consensus and, more importantly, acceptance that ultimately it's the responsibility of the 116th Congress to debate and vote on the path forward in Afghanistan. Building on the issue of democratic accountability, I would like each witness to address whether you support the current Congress holding votes on whether to repeal the 2001 AUMF and whether to pass a new authorization that accurately reflects what U.S. troops are doing on the ground in Afghanistan today.
Well, I'll bite on it. I absolutely think it's essential that we get a new authorization for the use of military force. President Obama, I think, was stretching it when we went back into Iraq. I mean, you can make the connection. The current administration is stretching it, to deal with our operations in Syria and continuing our operations in Iraq. When I watch the Congress try to deal with it, I get frustrated with it because we seem to come to an impasse. And part of the impasse that concerns me is you've got to give the executive branch, you're giving them authority to use military force. But you should not get into the details of what the strategy is and start to limit how that force would be used. And that, it seems to me, is the tension point that I've noticed in your deliberations. When we begin to impose that, then this body is not going to be able to agree. But I agree with the basic premise. I want the Congress to come together and authorize the use of military force and stop using that old authorization document, I don't believe, which is sufficient for what we're doing today.
Thank you. Dr. Jackson.
I'm very sympathetic philosophically to cleaning up the sort of authorities situation. However, I will say from the seat I used to sit in, the act of creating the detail that hangs on those authorities actually takes time and is really necessary. I will say that I think the commander, General Miller, today has the authorities he needs to prosecute the war both against the Taliban and against ISIS-K and al-Qaeda. It took years to get the right detailed authorities there so that he could use a small number of forces to go after these very large problems. My fear would be first do no harm, that is, be careful when we reopen this that we don't disrupt a series of authorities that are necessary to an increasingly skinny force waging a war in Afghanistan.
Thank you. General Field?
So yes, I think that we certainly need another conversation about AUMF, but not necessarily to expand the authorities, but to actually limit the authorities of the executive branch to keep us, to engage in and then keep us in sustained conflict.
Thank you. Very briefly, speaking of renewed congressional oversight of this war, I recently joined my colleagues in supporting the Ensuring a Durable Afghanistan Peace Act. Our bipartisan bill seeks to ensure transparency and oversight of any peace effort in the region. I'd love the entire panel, if you could, where I'm out of time, perhaps you could do it in writing, to address the constructive role that Congress should play in promoting a durable peace process. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Let's see. Yeah, Senator Peters.